The 1080 Ti of CPUs. Let's go, boys. Woo! Yeah, it's finally here, dude. It's safe to upgrade.
It is safe to upgrade now.
And yeah, once you get this CPU, you aren't ever gonna need anything else. Wait, what is that? No, get that off my screen. Here we go, the true 1080 Ti of CPUs. The 7800X 3D. This thing is how old now? It's gotta be what? Yeah, that's right. This CPU came out about a year and a half ago and it's still topping the charts like no other. AMD can't compete with themselves and Intel cannot compete with this product. Guys, Arrow Lake benchmarks came out today. And I mean, what did I say a week ago? This is a garbage platform. This is a garbage CPU architecture. At least that's what it seems like now compared to what we had in the past. Now, Hardware Unboxed came out with a 14 game average today of Arrow Lake. And yeah, the 7800X 3D is topping the chart still, being a year and a half old. And yeah, it's handily beating the 285K, which seems to be slower with faster DDR5 QDIM 8200. You know, just faster by 1 FPS there. Better than 1% lows by 1. It's just margin of error at that point. It doesn't make a difference. But handily beating at 205 FPS compared to 171. Now, I like to look at 1% lows because I feel like that represents gaming feel better. And yeah, so basically the 1% lows of the 7800X 3D is 22% higher than the 285K. And that's when it has faster RAM. Now, this isn't like an overclock or anything, but still, guys, that's pretty bad considering the 8800X 3D or 9800X 3D, I guess it will be called, is probably going to be at least 10% faster than the 7800X 3D. And yeah, so that's not looking good for Arrow Lake, guys. Like, you're gonna be hard pressed to, I'm gonna be hard pressed to see that anyone wants to buy this thing, guys. Like, what did I say last week? Like, who is this for? You know, who wants to buy this when, you know, you've had that gaming performance on Intel for a while? Sure, the power is a little bit higher, but during gaming, the power is not too high unless you overclock it to Kingdom Come. And, you know, if you wanted that efficiency, you could have went with AMD this whole time, you know? Now, if we look at Cinebench here, this is 2024, so I'm not as familiar with these numbers. It is top on the chart in multi-core performance. I'll give them that. But it's not by that much. It's by like 15% over the 14900K. So, hey, it's something. Sure, it's doing it at like 250 watts instead of like 400 watts. You know, AMD is giving really similar performance with the 9950X, and that's only about 200 watts. So, really, just kind of not too big of a win. Like, why do we really even care? But here's something I really wanted to talk about. This is how you're going to get my unique take on Arrow Lake. I don't see a lot of people talking about this, but Gamers Nexus did bring it up in his video that this 285K is having some frame consistency problems. And boys, let me just go back to this picture. You want to know why the 285K in Arrow Lake is underperforming? Do you really want to know why? Well, hey, lean in. Let me tell you a little bit of a secret here. It's because they're on a chiplet architecture. That's right, tile, chiplet, whatever you want to call it. It's not good for gaming, guys. Increasing latency is never a good thing for a low latency, high responsive task and application such as gaming. You never want to increase latency. It's going to hurt your performance. It doesn't matter how much RAM, memory bandwidth you have, how fast your CPU cores are clocked. If they have high latency, the gaming experience is not going to be good. And Gamers Nexus kind of showed in his chart here that the 14900K is having much more consistent frame time averages than the 285K. And frame times are so important. Honestly, if we could just have a chart of frame times for all these CPUs when gaming, that would be much more helpful than CPU or than FPS and 1% lows. Frame time is the holy grail of benchmarking CPUs. But yeah, so basically the 285K is having these spikes, and that just means the FPS is dipping more often. You're getting hitches in games. If you know of stuttering from Unreal Engine 5 and shader compilation, think about that, but it's not actually even from that. It's just from your CPU having a high amount of latency. Now, the 14900K is not having this problem. In fact, it's one of the lowest latency chips out there when it comes to gaming. And, I have a picture of the 13900K here, but honestly, guys, I'm just bring myself over here. Honestly, I'm just going to say this. Raptor Lake and 13900K, 13700K are also, I think, going to age really well. They're going to be kind of like a 1080 Ti of CPUs as well. Number one at the top with the crown for gaming will be the 7800X3D, no doubt. It has been aging wonderfully. And as long as it can keep all those assets and all of its information within that cache, it's going to be a very high performer. Now, but Raptor Lake, you're getting it all with the i9 13900K. You're getting super fast single-threaded performance, very, very fast multi-threaded. You're gonna have to find a way to cool it, but I'm sure you'll be able to do that if you've spent this much on a CPU. And very low latency with a very consistent gaming performance, and that's because this is built on a monolithic die. Wendell posted this on Level 1 Techs, and guys, it's crazy. We're getting out of the box latency of 130 nanoseconds on Arrow Lake. Is just that's just horrible, man. Horrible. Sure, we're getting a lot of memory bandwidth, but at what cost? I'd rather have lower latency. Now, he tuned this down all the way down to 83 nanoseconds, which is much better. But, as we know about many of these PC gamers, and after the degradation scandal, these people do not tune their CPUs. They will let them go hog wild out of the box if they want. So yeah, 130 nanoseconds out of the box is kind of unacceptable. Some of that may be due to the new faster RAM, but still, a large part of that is due to the chiplet architecture. I really thought Foveros would save us having that those chiplets and tiles on a silicon interposer. I thought, hey, they're promising monolithic latency, monolithic performance with this, but no, guys, it's in many cases it's still slower than last gen. And honestly, I think if they just backported Raptor Lake to the TSMC 3nm node, we would have saw like 30-40% more performance, and it would have been great, and much lower power probably too, because those cores were tuned so efficiently. 14 generations of tuning those cores, and now we're kind of resetting the whole architecture here. And sure, this is a good building and foundation for a new start to Intel processors, but honestly, it just feels like something ain't right here. I know that we're gonna have to go chiplet at some point. Me personally, I'm gonna hold on to my monolithic dies as long as I can. I have a 4080 that's monolithic and a 13700K that's monolithic, and I'm very happy with both of them. With especially now considering I'm basically gonna consider my CPU a 1080 Ti of CPUs. Also, we saw some overclocking performance with DeBauer. He's coming in clutch with this because I couldn't find any other YouTubers posting anything today about overclocking performance. And I was really counting on that because that's something I think that's very interesting, and honestly, some more people should have done if they wanted to stand out. But yeah, he overclocked this thing. I think it was 5.7 gigahertz on all the P cores, and he got the RAM to 8800 megatransfers a second. Now that's CL42 cast latency. But yeah, I might have got these numbers mixed up. Don't quote me on all that because I've watched like 10 videos today on Arrow Lake. But when you tune it and get it right, sure, it's in this game, in Counter-Strike 2, which all the other videos I saw, it was losing horribly to the 7800X3D. It's actually tying it here, but its 1% lows are much worse, like almost half of the 7800X3D and half the 14900KS. Now he's got his 14900KS tuned so well here that it's even beating the 7800X3D by like 10%. So apparently he knows what he's doing with his chips, and he knows how to tune them very well. The 7800X3D versus the 14900K, because many of you in the comment section, the 14900K is just the 13900K. They're the same thing. Many in the comment section are probably gonna be saying like, nah, ain't no Intel CPU with 1080 Ti of CPUs. It's 7800X3D or bust. Now, I think that's kind of short-sighted. I think you have to give credit to Raptor Lake and just for how performant it is. It's on Intel 7 and it's trading blows in many cases with the 7800X3D and beating Arrow Lake in gaming. And yeah, that thing was designed and tuned to the very limit. And that's kind of cool as a hardware fanatic. 11 months ago, this video came out by eTechnics. I'm not really sure who that is, but he did, 42 games. 42. This is a lot of games. And he found that in the 1% lows, the 7800X3D was 5% slower than the 14900K. Probably because, it is a chiplet based chip. Now, interestingly, in the 1080p average, it is 1% faster. So averages, it's faster, 1% lows, it's slower. Just by a little bit, but 42 games, hey, that can be a difference when you get 5% slower over across 42 games, I feel like. So basically, back then, before all these Windows updates, and basically, it looks like we had a little bit of fine wine with Zen 4, I'm not gonna lie. The 14900K and 7800X3D were kind of tied. Now, it looks like the 7800X3D is a little bit faster now, which is great. It's kind of weird to see that out of a CPU, but I guess it can happen. But my point in saying this is, after I saw this video, I started thinking like, okay, but which one's like more consistent, the 7800X3D or the 13900K? Because the 13900K is monolithic, and the 7800X3D is chiplet. Sure, it has a ton of cache, but it's still a chiplet CPU. And which one really deserves the 1080 Ti of CPU's title? Not saying that they both can't have it, but which one deserves it more? And so I got this article, and these people did the amazing work of filming and recording frame time graphs. And what they found is in a lot of these games, the 13900K spiking here, 7800X3D spiking a little bit. They seem very, very equal, right? Like, for the most part, they are mirroring each other. Now, even right here, the 13900K did worse. But for the most part, over all of the other games, it seems like, well, even the 13900K is doing worse here too. But when I was looking through this, basically, it seemed like to me, they both don't have a huge issue with latency. And that's probably because, like we said earlier, the 7800X3D can fit all of that within its cache. It has enough bandwidth from the cache to feed the FPS engine before it gets reset with Infinity Fabric, and it can feed that memory. That amount of cache keeps the cores fed. And, so I was thinking, okay, what about the 7700X non-3D? Can we see frame time spikes with that? Because I haven't talked about this on the channel. I used to own an AMD CPU, and it was a non-3D chip, 5800X, and I saw huge spikes in my frame time. And it wasn't shader compilation issues. It was just huge spikes. And I narrowed it down to it being a chiplet CPU, and I switched to a 12600K, and the issue was gone. Okay. So, Tech Power Up did an amazing review of the 7700X. And in this review, basically, they found it was for frame times versus the 12900K. That the 7700X has these huge spikes at some points. Like, look at this spike. And it's not very often. When I had an AMD CPU, I didn't notice it was very often, but sometimes I'd just get these huge spikes to where it would just be like 5 FPS. And it really ruined the experience for me. And that's because of that chiplet based CPU. I mean, look here. Look at it. Like, it's just happening so often. And sure, the 12900K, it happens too, but it doesn't happen to the same extent. And yeah, so I think, this issue, it happens with the 7700X, probably to a less extent than it did with the 5800X, because that CPU had a worse IO tile, 12 nanometer IO tile. This one has I believe 7 nanometer or 6 nanometer. But basically, yeah, these chiplet CPUs are not good for gaming, guys. They're built for server. They're built for saving money, saving you silicon, lower die sizes, lower costs, but they aren't built for low latency gaming. The 7800X3D was an amazing invention that bypassed the limitations of this chiplet architecture, at least on AMD CPUs. You have to give AMD some credit here. They have these chiplet CPUs that are doing pretty good, especially compared to Intel's new CPUs, where it looks like they're having some trouble with chiplets. And they're doing all that with over Infinity Fabric, which is honestly decrepit at this point. They should update that. But the cores are well adept and to be able to handle this Infinity Fabric and the limitations of the Infinity Fabric, but they could use something better. But AMD's done a good job on mitigating the damage of the chiplet architecture with its modern Zen cores, and then they put that a step farther with the X3D. Now, Intel was just doing great in gaming before Arrow Lake because they were just monolithic. They pumped the clock speed up. You could have low latency RAM, low latency access, and everything was good, you know? Now we're at this 285K, and it's just this chiplet CPU. I'm looking at the stats here, guys. It takes up 243 millimeters squared of die size, and the compute tiles on TSMC 3 nanometer, and the GPU tiles on TSMC 5 nanometer, and then the rest is on like 6 nanometer from TSMC. So it's not all 3 nanometer, but still, guys, it should have way more transistors than Arrow Lake here that has a die size of only about 10 more millimeters squared. However, in many cases, this is winning in gaming. Sure, in all core, when you would actually use all those transistors, this is winning by like 15%, probably more if you overclock it. But guys, how do you not see that as disappointing? I just look at Arrow Lake and I look at it in awe of all the technology that went into it and how cool it is. And then I see the benchmarks and I just can't help but be a little upset and disappointed. I mean, I really am disappointed in Arrow Lake. I've been looking forward to Arrow Lake since Alder Lake was announced, and I always thought it would be the CPU I'd upgrade to. I'd always thought that Arrow Lake would cook, as I said in my video. But no, guys, Arrow Lake did not cook, and I'm ripping on Arrow Lake just like I ripped on Ryzen 9000 when it first came out. You can see that video up here, the video about me ripping on Ryzen 9000, because I just try to call it how it is. I'm not trying to be a fanboy. I have an Intel CPU. I prefer monolithic chips because I'm a gamer, but also I'm a content creator. So I found that the Intel 13700K provided the best of both worlds for me, where I could also game with low latency monolithic chip and also have all the cores I needed to get my work done. I get over 30K in Cinebench R23. So definitely am good on multi-core performance. I play at 4K with the 4080, so I don't really need any more CPU performance. Moore's Law is Dead is coming out and saying that, you know, we may get Panther Lake on LGA 1851, and that might be 10% more performance. And a lot of things he's saying is kind of interesting. I'm starting to agree with some of the things he's saying when he's talking about them reusing the Meteor Lake IO tile on Arrow Lake, and that's kind of bottlenecking some of its performance here. That could very well be the case. It seems like they are the same dies. Also, he even admitted that the IO die on Ryzen 9000 is probably holding it back in his latest podcast, and starting to make some sense now. He's still very much an AMD fanboy, but you know, he's talking the truth for once, and yeah, I'm all here for it. I'm not trying to pick a side or anything. Me personally, I just don't like chiplet-based computer or chiplet-based chips unless they're really efficiently designed. I think that if Arrow Lake designed itself where it had a compute tile that had all P cores on it, very, very low latency, and this tile also had an IO tile on it, P cores and IO tile in the same tile, that would have been really cool. And then we could have separate tiles of E cores, so you could probably even have like on one E core tile you could have 16 E cores, and then you could have two E core tiles for 32 E cores. And then on the P core tile, you could have 10 P cores, and that'd be great. But you know, they didn't do that. They gave us something that's probably more geared towards laptop. Now that I'm thinking about it and looking at it, this probably will do a lot better in laptop. But yeah, as far as desktop and as far as gamers go, this is kind of a nothing burger, guys. Then I think the true 1080 Ti of CPUs as of now is the Ryzen 7800X 3D. And you know, the 13900K is a really good choice as well, guys, especially if you want to do content creation and gaming. Just make sure you know how to tune your CPU. Don't let its voltage go haywire. But yeah, I think I would consider my 13700K at 1080 Ti CPUs as well. It'll probably be good 3 or 4 years from now, especially the way CPU progression is working. What is the true 1080 Ti of CPUs? Is it the 7800X3D? Is it the 13700K, 13900K? What is it, guys? Let me know in the comments. Did I get this way wrong?